Welcome to this edition of AV Smackdown, and this is a very special edition because we're hosting this one live from Kortrijk in Belgium. I'm Lieven Bertier. I'm working for Barco's ClickShare business. I've been in the AV industry for almost 20 years now, and I'm very happy to have two guests today. First of all, live with me in Belgium, Chris Nero, all the way from New Jersey. What's it like in Belgium, Chris?
I'm digging this Belgian thing. I've never been here before. This is an awesome experience. I get to come to HQ and walk around and check out the experience center. It's awesome. But you know what? I may be here, but my coworker, my co-host, my partner in crime is all the way back in California with a huge time shift. Mark Coxon, say hi.
Hey, to not feel totally left out, I rang a bell when I was at the gym this morning. Does that count?
Yeah, I rang a bell. I saw what you did. I saw what you did there.
Well, at least we have one who doesn't have a jet lag, so that's cool. Thanks, Mark, for joining. So today I would like to talk with the two of you about meeting room collaboration and especially technology that goes into meeting room collaboration. And maybe first of all to start with, people talk a lot about meeting room technology, what is happening, collaboration as a competitive asset, but what kind of trends are you seeing in this market? And let me start with Mark.
It's an interesting market because we hear this word collaboration all the time, and I think we, inside the industry, sometimes we even start to make fun of it a little bit as a buzzword because everything is a collaboration device now, per se. So, it's one of those things that I think the definition has been somewhat broad. Over the last couple years, collaboration has seemed to focus on wireless presentation and the interactive whiteboard seem to be the two things that get the collaboration moniker attached to them quite often. The interesting thing is that I think we're still kind of in the early phases of understanding exactly what collaboration is, because it really needs to it doesn't need to be technology driven. And I think we've tried to say, okay, what technology will enable collaboration as opposed to really look at workflows and what people are doing in the room. And one of the best quotes I ever heard on this on the interactive whiteboard market was from John Green, who's at New Era Technology, used to be Advanced AV, I think. But John Green one time said he didn't think that the interactive whiteboard was going to last because the flow of a meeting isn't that a participant of the meeting gets up halfway through a presentation and comes up to the board to show something with the person who's up there. And so I think, we have these devices that enable us to talk to each other, that enable us to share information back and forth, which is the true, definition of collaboration. But I don't think we've quite hit the gold standard for what that is yet. And I think as we find ways to more easily connect cameras and microphones to our collaboration systems without having tons of USB extenders. I think as we find more ways to enable remote participants to share things easier from mobile devices and things like that, I think that's when we'll really see collaboration as a technology be adopted, on the horizontal.
Yeah. And for me personally, for collaboration, in order to be, brought into a company and adopted, I think it's part of their culture. You're not going to force you're not going to force technology to solve a problem. Mm-hmm. That is something that I've seen integrators and even end users that hear the word and want to come out and talk about collaboration. You can't just throw technology or technology in general at it and solve it. So it's very much work related, workflow related. It's also part of the culture in the sense that, do you need collaboration? Some people don't, are very much their own the little group. They don't need to interact and stuff like that. But as soon as you get those team environments going, if you are in a team environment, collaboration needs to be at the pinnacle of what you're moving towards. And if you're not moving towards that, you need to look at room sharing and in-room sharing, because it is the way the work forces are moving now. It's very interactive, very team oriented. So it's culture driven, not necessarily technology driven.
That's something very interesting you bring on. It's cultural driven. And I came across a statistic that said we have millennials in the companies now, and 96% of them are bringing in their own stuff. They are bringing in their own devices, their own technology. What does that mean for collaboration, Chris?
It really comes down to what they're comfortable with. It's maybe it's a generational thing. But if they're comfortable using their phones, or if they're comfortable using a device or a laptop, they're gonna buck the trend. You know, whatever the trends are, they don't care. They will go their own way. And you can throw whatever you want into the space and say it's the greatest stuff that ever existed. But if it doesn't work the way that they want to work, it's going to be a problem. You know, we have to look at IoT as a sister partner to anything that's collaborative or anything that we're doing to make collaboration possible. So whatever that takes, it has to be, I guess, end user approved.
Mm-hmm.
I think too, Lieven. I was watching, Chris cover the AV Awards this week, which was when he was in London, and one of the interesting standouts that I saw that won an award, I believe, was a company called Crowdbeamer, and that was a company that's creating software that's not just allowing you to share, or the presenter to share up to the main screen, but also pushes that content out to any screen that somebody happens to have that's participating in that event. Yeah. And when you put that data local, then you are helping facilitate the workflow that they already want, which is, I have this device, I have a screen on it, I want to be able to do my dictation, my notation, do any kind of markup or anything here locally, and then be able to share that up. I don't necessarily have to be in a preferred seat to see the screen, or nor do I want to come up to the front of the room and start, making notes on a whiteboard. And so I think we're seeing some of that. Like I said, I don't think we've seen a fully integrated solution that includes all of these things yet. Right now it's piecemeal, but I think Chris is right. If we decide not to do it, somebody's going to skunk works it and do themselves for the most part. So.
I have a question for you, Lieven. You're our technical guy, our expert in a lot of the things that have to do with collaboration. But my question to you is based around the things that we just talked about, collaboration, culture. Mm-hmm. How important is the mobility piece to this whole thing? IoT stands on the side. Is it a triangle, or are we missing another piece to the collaboration?
Well, I think you already brought up a number of core dimensions. It's about ideation, it's about presentation, it's about capturing what is happening in the meeting. Mm-hmm. But indeed, if we talk about the different generations we have in the meeting room, BYOD is a crucial one. Everybody's bringing their own technology, their own devices. Mm-hmm. And linked to that, to me, it's also about experience. So you want to guarantee unified experience to people out there, not just for a MacBook user, a certain experience, or for a Windows user. No, the experience has to be there for everybody. But now that you asked me this question, I would like to know from you, Chris, what is the number one thing that is missing for collaboration in the meeting room? If I gave you $1 million, what investment would you make?
$1 million investment outside of teleportation, getting us all there, and maybe some holographs. Though I'd be kind of chubby on a holograph, that wouldn't work very well. What it made me see, what would be missing from that? You stumped me, because you threw me off for that. Well, that's why it's AV Smackdown. You smacked me down. I wasn't ready for it. That's awesome.
Let me first try, Mark. Of course, we have a lot of venture capital here in Belgium. So over to the valley, you get 10,000, Mark. What will you add to the collaboration?
Oh, did I get downgraded because of the exchange rate? Is that what happened? So if I was gonna throw money at anything, I think it would be that initiation into the meeting. So how do I bring my device into a room, and that device already knows that display is ready to be connected to, and how does my device start to pick up or join into that space? Without me physically having to do anything. I think that barrier to entry a lot of times is the user interface, and how do we make that as invisible as possible, maybe even without any hardware that you actually have to touch. And a few people are trying to work on that with Bluetooth signaling and RFID and those things, but it hasn't quite gotten there yet, so that's where I'd put some money.
I'm going to take whatever money you have left over. Now I know what I want. All right. I think what's missing is I'm not a huge supporter of the whiteboard, because it kind of doesn't work with a huddle environment. So I think if you were to say, Chris, here's a bunch of money, go out there and invent something, I think I would put something on a table that would allow people to ideate right there in front of them. It's more natural to be talking and scribbling. There are some manufacturers out there on the furniture side who are making writable tabletops. Right? How do you capture that? Do we bring back the old document cameras that used to be up in the ceiling, or do we make the tabletop, some sort of interactive tabletop now to allow for that collaboration? Capturing what's happening, the room, I don't think you can collaborate without another piece. You're writing, you're doodling, you're scratching the ideas. And if, even for integrators in our space, the move towards design think is all about writing lists and chopping it down and moving things around and starting with the end user experience and moving your way back. Those are all notes. Writing that stuff, interacting wirelessly, flawlessly with people in front of you all around that circle. I think that's let's make a round interactive table. How's that? That's a lot of money. Mark, get your credit card ready.
No, I like it. One of the things that I kept as at trade shows, people always give things away. But one of the things I kept one year was they were actually like a fabricator. They make custom set work. But what they gave away was this little spiral bound book. It was called a ThinkPad. And inside were napkins, just a book full of napkins for napkin sketches, which I thought was one of the most creative things ever. But you're right. Most of us are visual. And at some point in a meeting, if we're trying to explain something or we hit some kind of roadblock, typically the way we do that is we either start to diagram stuff out, start to create some kind of flow chart, and that's all done on the fly. That's not me dragging and dropping boxes into PowerPoint and trying to select colors for them and then type in text. That's going to be something where the pad and paper comes out. So I like your idea.
Well, thanks.
Other question from my side. So there's a lot to do about innovation, of course, especially when we talk about technology. Should the innovation come from the huddle space or should it come from the boardroom? What's your take on this, Mark?
Well, I think you look, it depends. The stakes are higher in the boardroom typically, right? If you have a formal meeting with C-level executives, most of the time, and I'm not saying all companies work this way, but in most companies, they're not going to go sit on a couch in an open space and start to have those high-level decisions as people are walking by and doing those things, because there may be some sensitive nature as to what they're doing. Now, I think in those situations, though, those type of meetings do have a structure, an agenda. They are well thought out ahead of time, and these ad hoc things that Chris and I are talking about maybe don't happen as much in a big structured presentation meeting like that. So I think the value becomes, for people who are sitting at desks and need to go somewhere to start to talk and work together. They're not sitting around somebody's desk anymore. So maybe that is the huddle space that needs that on a wider scale.
You're disappointing me, man. That's not what you're supposed to do.
What
we need is what has been dying. We need these rooms. We need bigger rooms. What happens? You have these small little huddle spaces. Great. Me, you, Lieven, we sit around. We work on an idea. That's great. What happens when we have to bring our team, right? Most people and most companies that are out there are discouraging, same building, separate rooms being connected via video. Let's bring back the big rooms. Let's give them the ability in these big rooms to sit around and do the collaborative stuff. I don't necessarily think it needs to be in the boardroom. I think it's great in the huddle room, but I think that there is still a need. Though it's been being killed off by, these little 3-person conference rooms and soft seating, I still think there's a need for the 6 to 8-person conference room that people are going to sit around and have ample amount of workspace to play. Throw some Legos on the table, get some markers and pad and paper. Let's get, let's get silly. Let's think of some things to do.
Yeah, and I guess maybe that's where I'm thinking about this differently. I don't necessarily always think of rooms and spaces as the size and number of chairs. And, I try to think of the task that the room facilitates. I agree with you that there need to be some bigger spaces for more people to get together. Obviously, my point was the stigma of the boardroom and the type of meetings that happen in a traditional boardroom, the one-to-many meeting that happens isn't a place where we necessarily need those advances so much. But we need those advances in, kind of this new imaginative collaboration type workflow. So I do agree we need big spaces. I was thinking of this as more of a task-based thing than a seat-based.
Real quick to you, Lieven, how do you see spaces? You've been dealing with the spaces and how they're operating and functional. Do you see spaces as seats or function? Because outside of these walls here, the term varies. Nobody can define what a huddle space is, and that's something that actually me and Mark have actually discussed offline. How do you define a huddle space If it's by the physical seats in the room, by the furniture in the room, by the technology in the room, there's so many different variables. What do you think?
True. To me, I have to say we're talking about spaces all the time, no longer about rooms. So to me, there is clearly a disconnect between what you're trying to achieve and the physical space where it is happening. So meeting rooms, will they disappear? No, there's always going to be some kind of in-house or in-company collaboration. But at the same time, you see, in my opinion, a paradigm shift driven by huddles, driven by huddle spaces that are changing the way how people are working together.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
All right. One more for you guys. BYOD. We already talked about it, but to me, very important to know, is the dynamic going to happen mainly in the meeting room, or is the dynamic going to be driven by remote participants? What's your take on that?
You got to start to account for the remote participants, and I don't think it necessarily has to mean a fancy, over-the-top video conferencing system. I think that this is now a connectivity, a web connectivity type of thing, where internal to the room, you now remove the wires. If you can do wireless video in a room, you should bring in people wirelessly as well. I think it goes with the theme. I think it goes with what people are looking for, remotely being in another space, watching. I think that's the future. Mark, what's your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think if you strive to make the remote participant feel like he's there, you win the in-room participant anyway, right? I mean, if we focus on that remote participant and we can give them the access and the ability to participate in a way that they were in the room, then if somebody in the room decides to use their device, all the better. So I think if we aim for remote, we get the other one to boot. So why focus on the guy sitting in the seat?
All right, excellent. It was already touched upon. You talked about holograms and so on, Chris. So last question from my side. Everything that has to do with artificial intelligence. There's a lot to do about IoT, all that kind of stuff. What do you see happening in the world of AI, and what do you think is really realizable, and what is still 10 years ahead? So, Mark, you go first. You can choose what you see impacting today or how you see AI impacting 10 years from now, and then Chris takes the other question.
So, I think today the big two advantages we can get from AI are creating personal profiles and personal preferences. As systems understand what we do when we come into meetings, if we can start to log those behaviors and log those preferences, the great thing would be if I could walk into the large room and they know in the large room I use the drop-down projector and I like the lights a little higher for people to take notes. And then also when I walk into the huddle room, it knows I'm going to use my iPad, and all of a sudden it launches my keynote. It'd be nice for the spaces to react to me. And I think with the data that we collect, we could figure out a way to do that. And then I think on a larger scale, that same data obviously is very valuable for CEOs, executives, and IT departments to plan their spend, to make sure they're getting ROI, and then maybe also to adjust their technology planning in the future to reflect, investment in things that they know people are using in the space.
Yeah.
So you're asking. I guess I get the other half was what?
10 years from now question.
10 years from now, we don't have conference rooms. Yeah, we don't. What we're going to move to is it's going to be, once we've unlocked the ability to collaborate. Not just, obviously we've done this wirelessly. We add a remote component to it. AI is involved. I don't think that the offices will shrink. The offices will shrink to something completely of what they're not today. I think that the remote worker and the remote workforce in 10 years from now will start being better enabled to move forward. So that's my prediction, and it doesn't necessarily mean physical square space in an office now. I think it's now unlocking people, unchaining them to go out and be a lot more mobile.
Well, what you said reminds me of a quote I heard last week in London. I was attending an event called Age of Collaboration, and there the CEO from Oblong Industries said, 5 years from now, CIOs will be rewarded on how much collaboration they bring to their people. And I think that perfectly sums up what we talked about today. So thank you very much, Chris. Thank you very much, Mark, for joining today. It was a pleasure to host this edition of AV Smackdown. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and thank you very much.